What's up, guys? So today we're going to talk about status effects. So for this video in particular, I did a ton of research into how various status effects work and how they're coded. This led me to uncover a whole slew of mislabeled abilities, missing information, special interactions, and a bit of spaghetti code.
Yay! Spaghetti! Yay!
One pair of status effects in particular, counter and assist, are actually a giant mess of information that I wasn't expecting, which quite delayed the production of this video. I'll talk a bit about them in this video, but I'm probably going to end up making a separate video to talk about all the wacky interactions that result from counter and assist. For this video, we're going to talk about them last. I also found a bunch of mislabeled ability descriptions. I'll probably make a separate video all about those as well, but just to give you an idea of the kinds of things I found though, let's take a look at Shield Assault. As you can see here, Shield Assault's basic ability, Concussion Grenade, claims to attack primary target and adjacent targets for 160% damage and 90% piercing. That's, not what it does. What it should say is 160% damage to primary target, only 90% damage to adjacent targets, and only 15% piercing to primary and adjacent targets. Now, hopefully none of you are going to invest too much into Shield Assault anyway, but at least now you know. Alright, let's talk about status effects. First up, Ability Block. Ability Block is pretty straightforward. It blocks an enemy from using any abilities, and it lasts until the end of the affected target's turn. And it doesn't stack. And I mean, why would it? Next up, Bleed. Bleed was a super surprising one for me. Bleed applies a damage over time debuff that ultimately deals its damage at the start of the afflicted target's turn. Bleeds deal a percentage of the attacker's damage stat, which scales according to the ability level of the ability that applied the bleed, which you can see here. So for example, if the basic attack that applied the bleed was level 1, it would do 45% of the character's damage. If it was level 2, it would do 65%, and so on. And of course, bleeds can stack. Special interactions! Bleeds calculate first. This means bleeds will kill a target before the regen kicks in to heal them. Bleeds also calculate before Wolverines heal, and before Deadpool removes them, although if he survives the damage, he will remove them and then heal from them. On to Blind. Blind reduces a target's accuracy by 100%. This means that any blinded target will miss their next attack. Also, Blind does not stack. Blind actually lasts until the end of the afflicted target's turn, so characters that do multi-hit attacks like Gamora or Crossbones will actually miss all of their attacks. Special interactions! There are a few characters who are extra resistant or immune to blinds. Daredevil, for example, has 200% accuracy. Therefore, blinding Daredevil doesn't do anything. You know, because he's already blind. Hand Archer actually has 105% accuracy. Yondu has a flat 130% accuracy. Bullseye can have anywhere from 130 to 140% accuracy, depending on his passives level, and he gives all allies 5% accuracy. Since there's no such thing as a partial blind, I rate the extra 5% accuracy a solid spaghetti out of 10. Spaghetti interactions! Hawkeye has 170% accuracy, which sounds awesome. There's just one problem. That fact is totally irrelevant, because all of Hawkeye's abilities are locked in at 100% accuracy anyway, meaning he's never gonna miss anyway. Alright, here's a list of attacks that ignore blind. Next up, Deathproof. Deathproof prevents death upon taking lethal damage. This buff can stack. Quick tip, attacks that remove buffs, like Hawkeye's Concussion Arrow, will remove Deathproof, but since the damage calculates before the buff removal, you might as well not waste a Purge ability. And multi-hit attacks actually counter Deathproof, because if an early hit in the combo removes the Deathproof, a follow-up hit can kill the target. That brings us to Charged. Charged is a status effect that only exists to act as a condition for other abilities. Currently, this only applies to Black Panther's ult, Panther Rush, which charges when he drops below 50% health, and Cable's special Overload, which charges when he uses a basic attack. Charge doesn't stack, but it can be removed. Moving on, Defense up and defense down. Defense up reduces all incoming damage by 50% and increases resistance by 50%. Defense down increases all incoming damage by 50% and reduces resistance by 50%. Neither one can stack. Both of these effects clear at the end of the affected character's turn. Quick tip! You don't want to use defense down on someone who is about to take a turn because the effect will just wear off as soon as they do. Another fun one, evade. I get asked all the time what the difference is between evade and dodge, so let's get into it. So every character has a base dodge chance. Now for most characters, their dodge chance is 0%. For some characters, however, like Spider-Man, it can be as high as 25%. So what the evade buff does is it grants 100% dodge chance, and it's consumed by dodging an incoming attack. Some attacks ignore dodge, in which case the target keeps their evade buff. If you've ever fought a Nebula, you know what I mean. Multi-hit attacks counter evade because an early hit will consume the evade buff, allowing follow-up attacks to land. Evades can stack, but that actually brings us to a spaghetti interaction, which we'll talk about after these special interactions. Special interactions! So some abilities ignore dodge and therefore also ignore evade. So here is a list of them. Spaghetti interactions! So evade is currently capped at 2 stacks. Right now, a bug occurs when someone who already has 1 stack receives 2 additional stacks. Rather than increasing to 3 stacks, or at least increasing from 1 to 2 stacks, it will simply remain at 1 stack. For example, let's say Nebula has 1 stack of evade and she uses her Mayhem ability, which generates 2 additional stacks of evade. Well, that won't happen, and she'll just finish with 1 stack of evade. Now for an easy one, Heal Block. Heal Block prevents the target from receiving healing from any source until the end of their next turn. This buff does not stack, and why would it need to? Up next, Offense Up and Offense Down. Offense Up raises a target's outgoing damage by 50% and raises their focus by 50%. Offense Down reduces the target's outgoing damage by 50% and reduces their focus by 50%. Neither of these stack. Both Offense Up and Offense Down expire at the end of the affected character's turn. Moving on, Regeneration. Regeneration heals a target for 10% of their maximum health at the start of their next turn, and Regeneration can stack. Quick tip! You get better value using regen on targets with really high max health, since it's percent based. Now on to Speed Up and Slow. Speed Up increases the rate that a character's speed bar fills by 50%. Slow, as you may have guessed, reduces the rate that a character's speed bar fills by 50%. Both Speed Up and Speed Down, aka Slow, expire at the end of the afflicted character's next turn, and neither stack. Quick tip! Use targeted slows on characters with really low turn meter so that the slow hinders them during multiple instances where their speed bar would fill. And that brings us to Stealth. The Stealth buff conceals the owner, making them untargetable until the end of their next turn. This, of course, doesn't stack. What, you wanted to be double invisible? Special interactions! If there are multiple remaining targets who are stealthed, you can selectively target and attack one. You can't target a stealth character unless there are no other options. Splash damage hits adjacent targets regardless of whether or not they're stealthed. Here's a quick list of abilities that do splash damage. There are also abilities that will hit all targets and therefore ignore stealth. Here's a quick list of abilities that hit all targets. Spaghetti interactions! Chain attacks are programmed to check and make sure that they don't hit stealthed opponents. Even if, let's say, you have 4 remaining opponents who are all stealth, although you can launch the chain attack at your main target, it will fail to find any unstealthed targets and just end the chain after the first target. Quick tip! Characters in stealth can be counterattacked and can be called for an assist, which won't remove their stealth. Up next, Stun. Stun is the ultimate shutdown. Stun prevents the afflicted character from taking any action and wears off at the end of the stunned character's turn. Special interactions! No character can save themselves if they get stunned. Jessica Jones, Scientist Supreme, Ronin, Kree Oracle, and AIM Researcher can remove it from an ally, however. Even Deadpool's passive won't remove a stun. In fact, it will even block him from removing other effects and gaining any healing. That brings us to Taunt. Taunt forces enemies to only be able to target the taunting character. This buff doesn't stack and doesn't need to. If there are multiple taunting targets, you can choose between the taunting characters. Taunt expires at the start of the taunting character's next turn. Special interactions. Luke Cage is currently the only character that can taunt for 2 turns. Also, Black Widow's basic ability when stealthed and Yanu's passive will steal enemy buffs. However, neither of them will ever steal a taunt. Quick tip! Be careful applying a slow debuff to a taunting character, as this actually prolongs the duration of their taunt since it won't expire until they take a turn. And finally, we've arrived at the most confusing and least understood pair of status effects, so let's jump into it and try not to get any spaghetti sauce on anything.
Yay! Spaghetti! Yay!
Assist and counter. So we're talking about these two together because both assists and counters are essentially the same except for when they trigger. They both generate what we're going to call a limited basic attack. I'll explain the giant spaghetti code mess that is limited basic attacks in a second, but first let's mention the general idea behind the two status effects. An assist, despite being called an assist in several ability descriptions, shows up as team up attack in-game. One character will use an ability to call for an assist from a second character, causing the assisting character to use what we're calling a limited basic attack. Counter is a buff that guarantees a limited basic attack in response to receiving damage. Counterattacks interrupt chain attacks. Stun prevents counterattacks from occurring. Counter stacks are currently capped at 2 stacks, and we'll talk about that spaghetti interaction related to the counter stack cap in just a sec. But first, special interactions. Certain abilities, like Kingpin's Mastermind passive, can allow characters without an assist ability to generate assists. If an assist procs for a character that isn't using a damage ability, like a taunt or a heal, the assisting character will gain the assist buff, but then they'll just stand down, effectively not assisting. Kingpin's passive is also unique in that the assisting character can actually generate an assist from their assist, which occasionally makes for some hilarious triple and quadruple attacks. Spaghetti interactions. Just like with evade, counter is currently capped at 2 stacks, and right now the same bug occurs when someone who already has 1 stack receives 2 additional stacks. Rather than increasing to 3 stacks, or at least increasing from 1 to 2, it will simply remain at 1 stack. So, similar example, let's say Nebula has 1 stack of counter and uses her challenging foe ability, which generates 2 additional stacks of counter. Well, that won't happen, and she'll just finish with 1 stack of counter. Alright, if you've made it this far, congratulations. We're about to go deep into the spaghetti code jungle, so brace yourself for the answer to the question, what is a limited basic attack?
Yay! Spaghetti!
Oh boy. Here we go. So every character has their own limited basic attack. And not just 1, but actually 6. That's because the limited basic attack ranks up alongside their basic attack. Pretty simple in that regard. If a character's basic attack is, say, level 4, then their counter assist limited basic is also level 4. Okay, so what does a limited basic attack do? Well, you may wish you hadn't asked. This is because every single character has a limited basic attack that plays by its own rules, at every level. Wondering which abilities will and won't trigger? Unfortunately, that's different for every character at every level. Here's just a look at Crossbones' counter and assist values at every rank. You'll notice that his counter assists do piercing. This is, of course, to make sure that counters and assists always do some damage. Every single character does some piercing damage with their counters and assists, except for shield security. No, I'm not joking. Literally everyone except shield security does piercing damage with their counters and assists.
Yay! Spaghetti!
Also, and I swear I am not making this up, Shield Security actually has 15% piercing damage included as part of his regular basic attack that isn't listed in the ability description for it at all. Why? Because spaghetti.
Yeah!
Alright, here are a few fun and illustrative examples of unpredictable limited basic attacks. Ravager Stitcher's counter assist does exactly what his basic would do, 70% chance to apply a bleed. However, Captain America's counter assist does exactly none of the things that his basic does. He has no chance to gain defense up and no chance to chain. It just does damage. Weirder still, Yondu's counter assist does some of what his basic would do. Where he normally removes 2 enemy buffs with his rank 6 basic, his counter assist will only ever remove 1 enemy buff. And finally, Aim Assault's counter assist does a spaghetti version of what his basic does. While his basic attack at rank 6 has a 100% chance to apply 1 stack of bleed, his counter assist has only a 50% chance, but will apply 2 stacks of bleed.
Yeah!
Oh, and a few of them are bugged. Elektra's basic, for example, has a 70% chance to apply a bleed, and she also always applies 2 bleed stacks in addition if the target is a defender. Well, her counter and assist works the same way, or it should, except they forgot a line that makes it only apply to defenders. So her counters and assists actually always apply 2 bleed stacks and still has that 70% chance to apply a 3rd.
Spaghetti!
So you're probably thinking, well, that's just great. I'm not going to memorize all that. Well, don't worry, friend. I made a handy spreadsheet that explains what every character's counter and assist does at rank 6. I didn't include the lower ranks because I worried I might die of old age before I finished. Anyway, you can find that document in the video description below. Alright, you survived. So I'm going to include some of the findings in future videos, including which ability descriptions are flat out wrong. However, this video has been plenty dense enough, so we'll go ahead and wrap up by playing a fun version of Guess That Spaghetti, featuring Scientist Supreme. So Scientist Supreme's field trial ability converts negative effects into positive effects. Let's try to guess what happens to the negative effects that wouldn't have come from Scientist Supreme in the first place. Number 1, Ability Block. Can you guess what Scientist Supreme's field trials converts Ability Block into? Gotta guess? Believe it or not, Ability Block converts into Evade. Why? Spaghetti! Number 2, Blind. Gotta guess? Alright, pencils down. And the answer is, Blind converts into Stealth. Why? Spaghetti! Number 3, Stun. Got your guess ready? 2 seconds remaining. And the answer is, Stun converts into Counter. Why? Spaghetti! Number 4, Heal Block. I think you just might get this one. And time's up. And the correct answer is, Heal Block converts into Deathproof. Why? Meatballs! Nah, I'm just kidding. It's spaghetti!
Spaghetti!
So how many did you guess right? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for all the support. And please swing by the Twitch channel where I stream Marvel Strike Force every single day at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Alright, I'm gonna head off now. I have a really odd craving for pasta, so I'll see you guys real soon. Peace!
Yeah!